The Riddle of the Rose Cottage, Chapter 1. The Invitation. The sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, casting golden threads across Miss Jane Marple's garden, where roses nodded in the July breeze of 1955. Seated in her wicker chair, knitting a pale pink shawl, Miss Marple savored the village's distant laughter from the vicarage, the clink of Mrs. Price's teacups next door. Her peace was broken by the postman's arrival, a letter tucked among seed catalogs. The envelope, cream and crisp, bore the looping hand of Mrs. Clara Henshaw, and a newcomer to Rose Cottage, that ivy-clad relic on the village's edge. "Dear Miss Marple," it began, "I should be most grateful if you would join us for tea tomorrow at 4. Rose Cottage is rather unsettled, and your presence would be a comfort." The words "rather unsettled" lingered, a faint discord. In the polite phrasing, Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, narrowed. She knew Clara, only slightly a widow of 40-odd, arrived 3 months prior with her stepson Lionel Henshaw and a housekeeper, Mrs. Tuttle. Gossip, that reliable village current, whispered of Clara's wealth and Lionel's restlessness, but little else. Rose Cottage intrigued her. Once old Mrs. Baxter's home, its thatched roof and lattice windows hid secrets as surely as its overgrown garden hid weeds. Miss Marple recalled Mrs. Baxter's quarrels with her nephew over inheritance, a petty feud that soured tea for months. Clara's invitation, she sensed, was no mere courtesy. Folding the letter, she resumed her knitting, needles clicking like a metronome. Trouble, she knew from Mrs. Harris's row with her maid years ago, often wore a smile in St. Mary Mead. She glanced at her roses, their petals soft as secrets. Tomorrow, she'd wear her gray tweed and best hat not to impress, but to observe. People spoke freely to an old spinster, mistaking her silence for simplicity. Clara's unease, whatever its root, would reveal itself in glances, pauses, or a misplaced word. Miss Marple hummed softly, her mind already threading through possibilities as the village settled into dusk's embrace. Chapter 2. Tea and tension's Rose Cottage glowed under the afternoon sun, its roses wilder than Miss Marple's own, tangling over a gate that creaked as she entered. Clara Henshaw greeted her, a slender woman with anxious eyes and a smile too. "Quick to fade. Miss Marple, how kind of you," she said, leading her to a parlor where chintz curtains framed a table set with spode china. Lionel Henshaw, lanky and 25, slouched in an armchair, his tie askew. Mrs. Tuttle, the housekeeper, bustled and stout, gray-haired, her apron starched to severity-bearing scones and a silver teapot. Tea was poured, but harmony was absent. Clara's hands trembled, rattling her cup as she spoke of village life. "It's charming, but things go missing. A brooch, a spoon. Boys, perhaps, playing pranks." Her laugh was brittle. Lionel snorted, eyes on his boots. "Hardly boys, probably someone closer." Mrs. Tuttle's lips tightened, her glance at Clara sharp as a needle. Miss Marple sipped her tea, noting the undercurrents. Clara mentioned money, her late husband's estate, a sore point with Lionel, who wanted funds for London ventures. He muttered about freedom, Clara countered with duty. Miss Marple's mind drifted to Mrs. Lumley's niece, whose resentment over a will simmered until a vase fell. Here, too, greed seemed to coil beneath civility. She asked gently, "Missing items, Mrs. Henshaw? Have you searched thoroughly?" Clara flushed, stammering about locked drawers. Lionel shifted, his fingers drumming. Mrs. Tuttle cleared plates with a clatter, excusing herself abruptly. The air felt taut, like wool stretched too tight. As Miss Marple left, promising to return, she paused by the garden. A rose, half-plucked, lay trampled. She recalled Miss Fletcher's garden, where a broken stem marked a thief's haste. Clara's fear wasn't of boys, she thought, but of someone within these walls. Her needles, tucked in her bag, seemed to click in agreement as She walked home, the village whispering its secrets in the breeze. Chapter 3. The scream in the night-night cloaks St. Mary Mead, stars pricking the velvet sky. Miss Marple, reading by lamplight, was startled by her telephone's jangle. Mrs. Price's voice crackled through. "Jane," a scream from Rose Cottage. I saw lights flicker, then darkness. Miss Marple, calm as ever, urged her to rouse Constable Hargreaves. Sleep eluded her after. She knitted, her mind tracing the scream's echo. By dawn, the village buzzed. Clara Henshaw was dead. Miss Marple joined the crowd at Rose Cottage, where Hargreaves, earnest but plodding, guarded the door. Clara lay in her bedroom, a glass of sherry spilled on the rug, her face frozen in pain. The door had been locked, the key inside. Lionel, pale and red-eyed, hovered in the hall. Mrs. Tuttle swept the kitchen, her face unreadable. Hargreaves muttered about poison, awaiting Dr. Haydock. Miss Marple, invited to console, studied the scene. The sherry's sharp scent lingered, and Clara's knitstand held a novel, its pages creased. She recalled Miss Barton's fall in 1938, where a locked door hid malice. Clara's death felt staged, the scream a curtain raised on tragedy. Lionel claimed he'd heard nothing, reading late. Mrs. Tuttle said she'd slept soundly. Yet Miss Marple noted a curtain's hem slightly torn and a faint dust mark by the lock. Someone, she thought, had moved with purpose. As she left, promising. Hargreaves her thoughts. St. Mary Mead's quiet seemed deceptive, like a pond hiding currents below. Chapter 4. The doctor's verdict. Dr. Haydock arrived, his bag creaking as he examined Clara. Over tea at Miss Marple's cottage, he confirmed arsenic, likely in the sherry, taken near midnight. Slow, painful, he said, shaking his head. Hargreaves, joining them, shared Lionel's story. He'd argued with Clara over money, but swore he'd stayed in his room. Mrs. Tuttle claimed ignorance, her duties done by 9. Miss Marple, offering shortbread, asked about the sherry decanter left in the parlor. Half full, Hargreaves noted, but no one admits touching it. Clara's will, per Lionel, gave him a pittance, most going to a cousin, Miss Edith Crane. Miss Marple's needles paused. Inheritance, like Mrs. Norton's bequest, often stirred poison beyond the chemical kind. She visited Rose Cottage, eyeing the decanter's crystal facets. A smudge marred its neck, unnoticed by Hargreaves. She recalled Mrs. Dawson's bottle, tampered by a greedy hand. Lionel's debts, whispered by Mrs. Price, suggested motive, yet Mrs. Tuttle's silence felt heavier. As Miss Marple walked home, the village green seemed to watch, its calm a mask for secrets brewing since Clara's arrival. Chapter 5. The locked room. Hargreaves puzzled over Clara's bedroom, its bolt drawn tight, key on the floor. No windows were forced. The chimney was a child's width. Miss Marple, invited to inspect, stepped lightly over the rug. A scratch near the bolt caught her eye, faint as a whisper. Curious, she said, her voice mild. She recalled Mr. Thompson's shed, where a string tricked a latch. Clara's fear of thefts, per Mrs. Tuttle, explained the lock, but not the scratch. Miss Marple questioned Lionel, who fidgeted, claiming he'd knocked at 10, unanswered. Tuttle admitted cleaning the room daily, bolt undone. The sherry glass, washed by habit, held no clues, but Miss Marple pictured Clara's routine sherry book sleep. Someone knew it well. She noticed a thread, gray and coarse, caught in the doorframe, unlike Clara's silk gowns. Her mind turned to Mrs. Ellis's burglary, where a servant's cloth hid intent. The lock, she thought, was a riddle solved. By patience, not force. As she left, St. Mary Mead's church bell tolled, a reminder that time uncovered all. Chapter 6. The cousin's arrival. Miss Edith Crane arrived by train, her suitcase battered, her face pale under a neat hat. At the Blue Boar, she met Miss Marple, summoned by Hargreaves. I barely knew Clara, Edith said, her voice tight. Her money, it's a shock. Mrs. Clement, hosting tea, shared gossip. Edith's Bristol shop teetered on ruin. Lionel, at Rose Cottage, scoffed at Edith's grief, hinting at letters Clara feared. Mrs. Tuttle, serving silently, muttered about Edith's demands. Miss Marple, knitting by the fire, observed Edith's bitten nails, her glance. At Clara's photo, she recalled Miss Fletcher's cousin, whose debts drove theft. Edith's inheritance, Rose Cottage, savings eased her woes, but her surprise seemed genuine. Miss Marple borrowed Clara's letters, finding one to Edith. I worry about trust. The village, basking in summer, felt tense, as if Clara's shadow lingered, pointing to a truth Miss Marple hadn't yet grasped. Chapter 7. Village whispers St. Mary Mead stirred with tailies. Mrs. Price saw Lionel near the chemist. Arsenic stocked for rats. Mr. Gibbs noted Mrs. Tuttle's sherry purchases oddly frequent. Miss Marple, strolling past the post office, met Tommy, the paper boy. He'd seen a man gray coat, unfamiliar near Rose Cottage before Clara's death. Sneaky-like, Tommy said, chewing gum. Miss Marple tipped him a shilling, her mind on Mr. Ellis, a stranger who had schemed in 42. At home, she read Clara's letters again. One mentioned a discovery about someone trusted. Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. Discoveries like Mrs. Hart's lost ring sparked betrayal. She visited the chemist, confirming no recent arsenic sales, but a jar sat dusty on a shelf. The village's chatter, loud as rooks, hid a quieter truth, she felt, buried in Rose Cottages. Walls. Chapter 8. The hidden threat. Miss Marple returned to Rose Cottage, the decanter drawing her eye. A crystalline trace glimmered inside, not sugar. She urged Hargreaves to test it, suspecting arsenic lingered. Gossip pinned Lionel's gambling. Debts exposed by Clara as motive. Mrs. Tuttle, questioned, admitted Clara's threat to cut Lionel off. Miss Marple, lifting a floorboard in Clara's room, found a diary. Its final entry read, I know the thief. Tomorrow I act. The diary's pages echoed Mrs. Norton's, where trust broke under greed. Miss Marple saw Clara's fear, not of Lionel or Edith, but someone nearer. The thread by the door, the decanter's trace, the diary's hint, they wove a pattern. She recalled Mrs. Lumley's maid, whose loyalty masked theft. Rose Cottage's calm, like St. Mary Mead's, was a veneer, and Miss Marple's quiet gaze began to pierce it. Chapter 9. The trap. Miss Marple, with Hargreaves, planned a ruse. At Rose Cottage, she hosted tea, claiming Clara's diary named the killer. Lionel, Edith, and Mrs. Tuttle sat stiffly as she spoke of proof hidden in Clara's words. Her too. Eyes flicked between them, Lionel's sweat, Edith's clasp, Mrs. Tuttle's stillness. That night, Hargreaves watched the cottage. A figure pried at Clara's desk, caught in moonlight Mrs. Tuttle seeking the diary. Miss Marple smiled, recalling Mrs. Dawson's trap, where greed sprang first. The diary's vague threat paired with the decanter's poison, pointed to calculation. Mrs. Tuttle's thefts brooch. Spoon were tests, her resentment boiling as Clara's wealth grew. The village slept, but Miss Marple's mind raced, knitting clues into a tapestry only she could read. Chapter 10. The solution in the vicarage. Miss Marple faced the trio, Hargreaves at her side. Clara died by design, she said, voice soft as wool. Arsenic laced the decanter days before, sipped nightly, the locked door. A thread pulled. Through the crack, slid the bolt shut after. She turned to Mrs. Tuttle. You stole to provoke Clara, then poisoned her sherry, knowing her habit. The diary exposed your theft, so you acted first. Mrs. Tuttle crumpled, sobbing her confession resentment, envy, a plan to flee with Clara's jewels. Lionel's debts and Edith's gain were shadows. The housekeeper's hand wove the crime. As Hargreaves led her away, Miss Marple sat by her roses, knitting. St. Mary Mead, serene again, had taught her once more The quietest souls spun the darkest threads.